So today in our Bungalow segment, my first stop is here at the Chicago Bungalow Association with Carla Bruni. So would you mind telling us what is the mission of the Chicago Bungalow Association and how has it changed over the years?
Sure. So the Chicago Bungalow Association, we empower homeowners, vintage homeowners, to take advantage of energy efficiency programming and educational resources to help them maintain, preserve, and adapt their vintage homes and further strengthen their neighborhoods as a result. We have been around since 2000. Mayor Daley started this initiative after Alderman Virginia Rugai wrote her thesis on something called the Chicago Bungalow Initiative. And then he got wind of it, was really into it because they kept demolishing bungalows at the time, and then we came to be.
What was the primary purpose of the Chicago Bungalow Association when it started, and how has that evolved over the years?
We started out as the historic Chicago Bungalow Association. So we always wanted to, again, help maintain and preserve these homes. Over time, we've expanded the mission. So since 2015, you can actually become a member with us if you're in any vintage home that's at least 50 years old. So, and it has to be a single family home and owner occupied, but membership's totally free. And it's just a way for us to expand into, more neighborhoods where we can get more resources to more homeowners. And again, stabilizing neighborhoods is always sort of a second part to what we do because we really believe strongly in that as well. So that's probably the main way that we've changed. We're very, very focused on energy security as well. We've always been, or most of the time we've been around, we've been involved in making homes more energy efficient, but just sort of more and more and more so over the years as it's become evident that there's just such a need for that.
What have you found is the best way to make a historic home energy efficient? Like, what's the best type of HVAC system, or what do you guys try to do?
Sure, there's a few different things you can do. Air sealing, which is just basically plugging up all the little holes and cracks in these older homes, is the low-hanging fruit that has the most bang for your buck. You should always start with air sealing and then insulate. That is, before you worry about mechanicals, you should always make sure that you have what's called a tight envelope around your house. Otherwise, your mechanical equipment will be oversized, it won't be very efficient, it'll overcycle. So the first thing is sort of putting a jacket around your house, if you will. And then there's all kinds of, appliances have become so much more efficient nowadays too. And again, the tighter your house is, you can actually downsize your mechanical equipment also. So you need sort of a smaller, furnace, for example, than you would need if your house was really leaky. So you can save a lot of money, and obviously it has an impact on the environment as well.
So one of the most iconic aspects of Chicago bungalows are the original stained glass windows. How would you recommend homeowners preserve those windows while also not losing a lot of heat and cool air to the outside?
Sure, yeah. You can do a whole lot just making sure that any of your windows, stained glass or just any of your old windows, everybody talks about how these old, 100-plus-year-old windows are, leaky and everything. And you can put weather stripping around things like that. You can do just a lot with your original windows, even to make them more energy efficient. Same thing with stained glass. Over time, sometimes it gets a little wonky. You might need to do some repairs, but making sure that the area around that window is actually weather stripped or whatever you need to do. There's also storm windows you can get and things like that, but you can actually really increase the energy efficiency just by maintaining it properly, which many of us just don't do. So
how do you maintain them?
Sometimes it's, again, they get misaligned, a little bit. So, you might want to scrape the old paint off of them, readjust them, weather strip around the outside. You can get copper weather stripping and all kinds of weather stripping. And just making sure that they're sort of in balance and that they fit well into the space goes a long way. Also, little fun fact, those locks that are on wood windows, when you sort of turn the little lock on the bottom sash, they actually aren't necessarily a lock. I always wondered this. I've lived on the third floors in places, and I'm like, is Spider-Man going to break in? So actually, those are meant to sort of lock the windows in place. So it keeps the top and bottom windows sort of, positioned properly, and it kind of creates a seal around that space as well. So there's all different levels of restoration that you can do. Some are really inexpensive and some are much more expensive.
Okay, that's really helpful because I have a lot of homeowners that go into bungalows and they see the beautiful stained glass windows and their first thought is, well, what about my heat bill? So it's good to know that there's a lot of ways that you can preserve your heat bill or preserve your heat in your home while maintaining these windows so that people don't feel like they need to take them out. So what is the history of the Chicago bungalow and why is it so significant?
Sure. So bungalows were built in the 1910s and 20s, and this was after a lot of tenement reform was happening in the early 20th century. And, this bungalows presented this opportunity for middle housing, basically. So you didn't have to live in a tenement, and maybe you couldn't afford these fancy high-rise buildings that were being built at the time. So it was built to be affordable from the very beginning. There are these 1.5-story structures, right? So the top half story was intentionally unfinished, as was the basement. So the idea was like, well, once you get a little bit of money, you can turn that into an apartment or, pop out some dormers or do whatever and create a master suite or whatever it is you are interested in doing. So, so about 80,000 of these were built, actually probably more than that at the time, maybe closer to 100,000. And so they were built cheaply because they build like sometimes a whole block face at a time, just like bam, 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 bam with the contractors to save money, and they were had this rhythm going on. So all of these different things made them very affordable. And as a result, a lot of people in the working class were able to have more stability, better conditions. We had a pandemic in 1919 as well, and sort of being in these crowded quarters was really dangerous. So bungalows were this incredible opportunity for the city.
What resources does the Chicago Bungalow Association offer to homeowners to maintain their homes, and which homeowners would qualify?
Sure. We have all kinds of resources. Membership, again, is free. But one of the main benefits of membership is that it allows you to qualify to take advantage of grants that we have, which are almost always like an energy efficiency grant. There are other criteria that are required for that as well, in which you can find at chicagobungalow.org if you want to check it out. We do webinars, which you can access anytime. We have tons of them. We have programming in neighborhoods that we do periodically, giving talks, having booths, stuff like that. We have award ceremonies that have cash prizes and fierce competition. So we have the Dree House Awards, which there's multiple categories, interior restoration, window boxes, all kinds of things at different levels, and different, people can be really creative with them. It's not just about how much money you spend, it's sort of like the thought that goes into it. And, we also have a garden contest that we started, I think, in 2017. That is, it's pretty intense sometimes.
I've seen it,
but it's amazing.
The Instagram posts of the contests are super cool because you can see all of the runners up in these contests, what everybody did with their window boxes, their renovation, their restoration, the landscaping. So I've really enjoyed watching that on social media.
Yeah, it's fun. And it's nice too because, one of the really cool things about, again, we have all vintage homeowners are welcome. One thing that's really nice about bungalows and the fact that a lot of our housing was built in the same decades is that it's all sort of the same materials, same problems, same layouts, so people can get ideas on how they want to maintain their home. Somebody emailed me this morning who was like, I have to recover my dormer and we're re-shingling our roof, what color schemes and whatever. And so we can point to contest winners, we can point to social media, we can point to all these places to be like, here's all these ideas and what these things can look like. I can't advise you because I don't know what your shingle color is going to be, exactly, but like you can, get all these ideas. And so this sort of hive mind is created with all of our members, and we have over 30,000 members.
Oh my gosh.
So it's incredible. And we have a really active Facebook site around, all of these things. People are getting rid of this or they want to buy the, so they're just really active. So we can do a lot and answer a lot of questions, but we can also kind of leave it up to our membership to help out, which is cool.
And there's also financial resources, right, for homeowners in need?
Well, we have our energy efficiency grant, which is 100% free if you qualify for it. We also have a whole page dedicated to other things we know that are going on around the city, through the city itself or through other organizations that have different grants or low interest loans or things like that.
What do you see as the biggest challenge facing vintage homeowners today, and how can the Chicago Bungalow Association help them if needed?
Great question. So the two biggest issues that we come up against are repairs. There's not repair funding available, and these are older homes. They require a lot of maintenance, especially if it's deferred, that can kind of snowball. And energy security, as energy costs are getting more expensive. And the two can kind of work together: deferred maintenance, worse energy bills because your house is, not holding in the heat as well because there's a hole in the roof or whatever it should be, So we, again, with our energy efficiency programming, we help a lot of homeowners save a lot of money every year. I mean, we've done, I don't even know how many thousands of homes at this point around the city. And also there's, we try to do anything we can in terms of repair funding. Sometimes we can sort of build that into a grant if we're lucky. Other times, it's just a matter of empowering people, finding the right contractors who are reasonable, who aren't going to rip them off, and who will do actually a good job. Empowering them also sometimes to do the work themselves if they're able to do that, and helping them know the difference, So, so a lot of it's through our educational programming in that regard. But we feel very passionately about the need for, there to be more repair funding out there for folks, and we're hopeful that maybe in the future we'll see more of that too.
Is the city supporting that? Do you think that could take off with the city, or would that be difficult?
There are some repair programs with the city. They have like a roof and porch repair lottery and some other things. It can always be more robust.
Yeah.
We would love to see that. I'm sure everybody would. It's just a matter of how to make it happen.
How can the broader Chicago communities support the Chicago Bungalow Association's efforts to preserve these homes?
Yeah, it's also a great question. So I think a few ways. One is just being curious about older buildings and not seeing them as the enemy. There's so much animosity towards old things. Newer is better, newer is better. I could make many arguments as to why that's not true, especially because new stuff breaks too, and it's not nearly as repairable, unfortunately. And
the materials often are not nearly as solid.
It's very true. Not as mold resistant. There's a lot of things. So I'm very passionate about older architecture, but but just stoking that interest, which is something that I think we really try to do in general as an organization. And I think that we've been pretty successful at that. And people get excited, really excited to join when they get an old house and they realize they can. So that makes me think, okay, word's getting out. They know people who, are part of this, giant cult that we're trying to cultivate here of vintage building appreciation.
I will join.
Thank you. I think beyond that, again, it's just programs like general homeowner programs, any way that, we can find things for more repair funding, or contractors can be, we have a lot of contractors. We have a trusted referral list that our members have recommended. We can't vouch for all of them. We haven't worked with them personally, but it's a great way to get started for our members. And they often have 10% off if you mention the Bungalow Association, things like that, just ways to support, take a little bit of the burden off.
What if people have totally gut renovated homes, but the outside is the original structure?
You can still be a member.
Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of people have changed the interiors over time, and we don't judge. So, we do have a lot of resources for people who want to restore their homes to the nines, and we can get really into the nitty gritty with that. But a lot of our members are, we're just trying to sort of help them be able to afford to stay in their homes and age in place and things like that. Again, just sort of basic repairs, roofs need to be replaced, things just need to happen. So it's a real spectrum, and we have members all over the city, all different income levels, and we support all of them.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, pop quiz. How many bungalows are in the city?
Those are around 80,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
You nailed it.
It's a third of our single-family housing stack.
Wow,
so,
that's
yeah,
okay.
they're
That's
substantial
great.
still.
So one thing that I've noticed is in different neighborhoods of the city, there's different styles of bungalows that are more common. And one that I feel that you don't see that often is this one that has that like the pretty tiled roofing and the flat front. What neighborhood would you find that style to be most common in?
You know, it's really hard to say because you had these really prolific architects, these bungalow architects. I mean, they did other stuff too, but they did a lot of bungalows, like Ernest Brooker. Like, he was everywhere. I mean, we have 15 historic districts of Chicago bungalows in the city, and I had written 7 of those, and he's in every one of them, and they're all over the place. So sometimes it's sort of sometimes it's a preference of the architect, and because they're scattered, you'll see their stuff everywhere. Something like this, though, because it's yellow brick and it's more elaborate, would have been late 20s, most likely, mid to late 20s. That was right before the stock market crashed, and we were like, we've got money for everything, you know? So the more elaborate bungalows, the ones with the polygonal bays and the rounded front bays, those often were also late 20s.
Oh, okay.
And most of the yellow brick, especially the really rich yellow brick, is pretty much always late 20s.
What are some historical districts that come to mind?
Of ours, we have, let's see, West Chatham, South Shore, West Ridge, we have a Belmont Cragen one, there, Avalon Park. This is a mean quiz. Like I said, there's 15.
Okay, that's good.
But yeah, they're Hermosa, so, you know, they're all over. So you have the bungalow belt, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, there are some areas, certainly where there are bungalows outside of this belt, but that was just sort of the general development pattern at the time, as we had gobbled up all of this cheap land around sort of the western rim of the city at the time. So it was some of these areas, like Avalon Park, the homes were literally on stilts. Like, it was that swampy. And then, you know, that was what was there before the bungalows.
Right.
Like, crazy, right?
There's some really dark passages in the jungle about those homes.
Yes, I know. And that was all about tenement reform as well. So,
that's an important book, but definitely a tough one to read.
Yeah, agreed.
My favorite style of bungalow is the corner bungalows.
Yeah.
I love the side door and walking into the home, and they're usually a little bit bigger too.
Definitely. Yeah, corner lots in general are larger, and then you have like the bungaloids, we call them, which are just like bungalows on steroids. But because they're, you know, craftsman style and sort of have some prairie style elements, like they stress this horizontality and having them be sort of like low slung and stretched out. They don't look as big as they are when you get inside, and it's like Doctor Who's TARDIS, where it just kind of keeps unfolding, you know? You're just like, how is this a bungalow, you know? Some of them are huge, but they don't necessarily look that way because they're not tall, and, you know?
Right.
So I love that about them too. I think it's really interesting. But also interesting about bungalow neighborhoods is the economic, again, this was great middle housing, and continues to be. It's always had that function. But you used to see, if you look at the census data from like 10s, 20s, 30s, you'd have like factory worker, a clerk, and then like a doctor, you know, and then you'd have a family of like 14 living in one, and then just like an elderly couple, you know. So the mix I thought was really interesting, the economic mix in neighborhoods. There's kind of something for everyone, but you can guess that the doctor had the corner lot. Yeah.
Lucky guy.
Yeah, for sure.
What we were talking about earlier is the different styles, or the different ways that you would describe the front of a bungalow. So what are some different styles of bungalow?
Yeah, so, well, you have different roof lines. Most of them are what you'd call a hipped roof, which is like a four-sided roof. And then but you also have a gabled roof on some of them, which is usually a frame, a wood gable, which you don't think is a thing with bungalows because they're not the ones you usually see as the iconic bungalows, but they're actually pretty common. You'll even see a gambrel roof sometimes, like those barn-looking roofs. But then the bays are really defining as well. So in the 1910s, the earliest Chicago bungalows, they usually had an open front porch. And then as the years went on, they started closing them up. So they wanted to have the actual enclosed bays for more interior space. So it used to be, I think, like, I got to get away from my family. I got to get outside and hang out on the porch a little bit, you know. And then a second point of egress was sort of mandatory. So you also often had a back porch. So then you could kind of go to that instead, and all different reasons why that changed. But then these bays became these really defining features. So, and there's many kinds. You have a flat continuous bay, and then you'd have like a side entrance like this one has. You have like a projecting square bay. You have, a polygonal bay, which can have either 5 or 3 sides. You have a rare rounded bay. I feel like I'm missing one, but there's a lot. And then you have certain variation. Like you'll have weirdo bungalows, but they're definitely bungalows, but it was like some architect was just like, I want to try this, you know? So there's a lot of variation that way too. They're actually quite varied. Yeah.
Were any of the stained glass artists, did any of them become like very in demand that you were aware of?
I don't know. Not that I know of, but we did have angel gilding that came along, which is this special technique that are only found on bungalows in Chicago, I believe, where it's this sort of like, it's actual gold, I think it's gold leaf, I can't quite remember what it's made out of, but it's this whole technique of angel gilding that's done. We actually had the Angel Guild Awards here as well, but it's this interesting reflective, like you'll notice it sometimes, it'll kind of glint at you, you know, in some of these front windows, and that's angel gilding.
Oh, I do know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I think
I'm sure you've seen it.
Alyssa's house has that, because it is very like sparkling in the front. All right, well, thank you so much, Carla. That was super interesting. I love bungalows. I love vintage architecture. My mom grew up in a bungalow, and she really instilled that love in us. So I find all of this very interesting, and I hope that everybody watching will find it interesting as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jen. This was a pleasure.
Thank you.